Becoming the Man, Chapter 2, The Higher-Ups. Mr. White's meeting with the higher-ups would mark the beginning of his quiet exit from the business. He entered the two men's joint office to find them huddled over one of the desks, scouring through a scattered mess of papers. "Gentlemen, am I interrupting?" asked Mr. White. "We always got time for the white guy," the first higher-up said jokingly. Somehow the white jokes never got old with the higher-ups, even after all these years. Mr. White walked across the office and had a seat at the desk where the higher-ups were standing on the other side. The second higher-up spoke proudly. "So, Mr. White, we were reviewing your whole stat sheet late last night, and, well, I have to say, you have consistently put up some fucking numbers. I mean, really. When we went into detail on Detroit, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia alone, it was just astonishing." "Gentlemen, please hold your applause," Mr. White politely interrupted, putting a wall in front of the usual praise the pair would throw at him. "I'm actually going to get right down to the point," said Mr. White. "This job has been more than a unique experience, and it's made me very wealthy. I've enjoyed being above the law of man. I've had this job here since the Martin Luther King thing, and I just feel like it's my time to go out, while it's a quiet time. A quiet time referred to when all the trickery to hold down the blacks was unseen and in the shadows. Sometimes Mr. White had to be in the open with things, especially when someone would, as they say, fight the man. The Black Panthers caused Mr. White many problems in the 70s. Believe it or not, the American crack epidemic in the mid-1980s was one of White's biggest headaches. Somewhere deep in the government, someone else had pumped the potent life-destroying drug into the black community. This not only stepped on Mr. White's toes, it also made him have to readjust all of the strategies that he had in place. When you are in control of the destruction and chaos, you can achieve all of your goals easily. The people you are oppressing don't even know they are being oppressed. When you throw a drug into a community that makes people sell their own children, people are going to start looking deeper into the causes of things. In the back of his mind, he had a feeling that the higher-ups had something to do with crack cocaine being introduced into the ghettos of America. At the time, they claimed everything Mr. White did was moving too slow, and people like Carl Lewis, who at the time provided an excellent example for young blacks to follow, were undermining all of the work they had put in during the 1970s. Crack cocaine made Mr. White have to rewrite the theme music to the black man's destruction, a melody that in time even white America would be singing. Most of the choir members, however, were singing to themselves on the way to visit family members in rehab. Mr. White took more of a Buddhist approach to things. He just felt like he was putting a little sway onto the natural order with a little dose of influence. The drug epidemic bothered him, not just because it wasn't his idea, and who knows if in time he would have had to resort to using those extreme measures to cripple African Americans, but because it was so blatantly damaging. Mr. White continued, "I'm going to assume that the two of you had to have known this day was coming, and of course I'm willing to help my replacement get adjusted to things, assuming I will be replaced, correct?" The higher-up smiled in unison. "How can we replace you?" the first higher-up responded. "Irreplaceable," the second one echoed. The second higher-up continued, "Listen, I don't want to sound cheesy, corny, or even fucking sentimental. At the same time, I don't want to sound like some evil bastard who loves to see people suffer. I like to look at what we do here as a necessary thing. And when it comes to that necessary thing, well, comrade, you are gifted at it." The smiles never left their faces as they shook their heads and chuckled in disbelief. The first higher-up, who at this point had walked from around the desk and was standing next to Mr. White as he sat leaning forward in a Walter Knoll chair, switched instantly into a more serious tone and asked, "You realize you could have held this position for life?" "I'm well aware of it, gentlemen," responded Mr. White. He continued, "I appreciate the kind words. However, you know men in our business don't have the time to dwell on hellos and goodbyes or anything meaningless in between. There's business to handle, and our business is the world, gentlemen. And now I plan to watch you two fine fellows handle that world from the sidelines. I would like for my retirement to take effect as soon as you find a replacement, and I will just charge a small consulting fee while we do the switchover. That is, if that works for you." The second higher-up answered, "Of course it works. Why get lawyers involved and all that shit? And besides, that whole situation, your retirement, it allows me and my friend here to try something we've dreamt of for years. Yes, sir, just like you dreamed of this day, we dreamed of you dreaming of this day." The first higher-up quickly chimed in. in the most respectable manner, of course. The second higher-up continued, "We've devised a plan for this department that is, well, unimaginably brilliant. And the answer was sitting right under all of our noses all this time," said the first higher-up in disbelief. Mr. White felt as though whatever they had planned or conjured up was probably so horrendously horrific that he would rather not be involved. At the very least, it would definitely ruin his last days of being the man. Mr. White looked at his watch. "That, my friend, has to be a story for another day. If I'm going to be passing on this torch, I probably should have been getting some notes together like yesterday," he said. "It's all right," said the first higher-up jokingly. "He'll see everything in due time, and when he does, well, if he appreciates pure genius, he'll know his 30 years of work weren't in vain. Let's just say your legacy is in great hands, Mr. White."